Today we're talking about the original vampire story, the one that started it all. And I know that the myths came before. I know all the legends came before. I know that there's even this story, Carmilla, that came before, which I also haven't read that one yet, so I don't know anything about it. But I would argue that this is the one that really started the fire, the one that everybody remembers, the one that gathered all of the stereotypes, the one that you think of when you think of the original vampire, Dracula. Damn, that's good. And let's be honest, this book was pretty good. And I know you're supposed to say that because it's a classic. Oh, all the classics are good. It's special and all that fun stuff. But I genuinely read this. I thought, man, this is really legitimately a good book. Now, this book is an epistolary novel, which is a very fancy way of saying it's written in the form of notes and diary entries, journal entries, letters between characters in the book. And I have a real soft spot for that kind of storytelling. I really genuinely tend to like it, and I engage with it heavily. That is not everybody. Like if that's not for you, you might not like vibe with this particular book. Like, for example, by far the best part in the entire book of Hyperion was the like horror section that was written in this style by the priest. And it just like head and shoulders above any other section in that entire book. So having said that, this was right up my alley, a horror story written in that same style. So, you know, I was already predisposed to liking this book. But once again, if you do not like this style of book, you will probably struggle with this book. Also, it's old, so it's kind of written in a very different style than modern books. Speaking of it being old, the overall mood and vibe and just style of this particular book is just so amazing. The level of atmosphere just by reading the text is palpable. Now, a lot of that comes down to just the language and the way that it's written, and I know that's probably not super impressive considering that this very well could just be, you know, the language of 130 years ago or whenever the book was written. But between that real vivid atmosphere that you're getting both from the style of the writing and the language being used, and then that language transports you so completely into the time and the world of this book and of this story, it is just a really nice reading experience. Then you have the actual story itself and the actual storytelling itself. And I could see how this could be deemed as maybe a little bit lackluster by modern storytelling standards. It is a little bit less exciting. There's a little bit less of like this propulsive energy behind the writing. It's a little bit drier. All of the things that you kind of expect from modern storytelling are a little bit maybe not either dialed back or kind of maybe even non-existent here. But I didn't care. I really thought I had a good time with it nonetheless. And I really feel like it holds up quite well in for a modern reader compared to, you know, some of the other, actually I almost said compared to some of the other things that from back then, like I've read anything from back then. Actually, the only other thing that I've read from this exact time period is The King in Yellow, and that's fucking fabulous. So that might actually even be better than this. So actually, Brahms, you might need to pick up your your game here a little bit, Bram Stoker, because that Chambers guy, he might have you beat. Anyway, the hell was I saying? But anyway, it really does hold up quite well to like the modern standard of reading. At least I thought it did. And then the story itself is quite good and quite well told. Like, it's shockingly varied. I know everybody kind of knows the story of Dracula by now, I think, right? But like even reading it, I was like, man, this is pretty well like paced and like like from the beginning with that utter atmosphere where Jonathan goes to actually Dracula's castle and all of that tension that's built there, which is just fabulous, to then being switched back to Mina and Lucy and everything that's happening there, and you really don't know what happened to Jonathan for a good chunk of the book. Then, Dracula comes to town and all of the mood and tension that comes along with that. Then there's Van Helsing and all of that happens. Then we go after him. Then suddenly the book becomes like this whole chase thing, which doesn't normally get portrayed in most of like the adaptations or the modernizations. For some reason, they leave the chase aspect out. Like that went on a lot longer than you expected. Normally he just runs back to the castle and they won't run back and like intercept him or something like that. But this was a little bit more of a cat and mouse situation than I realized it was gonna. Maybe I'm just an idiot, I don't know. But it's really just well set up, then it's well told, then it's well executed. I thought as a actual book and as an actual like story, it was really quite well done. I don't know what I expected. I expected it to be a classic, and I expected it. I did expect it to be a little bit dry. It was that. I did expect it. I don't know. I was just really surprised how well it held up 130 years later. Just its ability to maintain mood, tone, atmosphere, tension, while constantly shifting gears, changing direction, and never getting stale, never overstaying its welcome, and really doing all of this in a relatively short page count, keeping it nice and tight, in, out, done. Now, pivoting into, let's say, the scare factor of the book, the actual horror of a horror novel, and there's not much of that here. It's not really scary. By horror standards, once again, by modern horror standards, this is very mild, amazingly dialed back, and that's okay. As when it comes to my experience, very limited experience with these older style novels, they live and exist much more in the realm of mood, tension, and atmosphere. And in that case, it's doing just fine. I don't know if it's like the best of the best. Once again, limited experience, but it's doing just fine. It really holds its own quite well. I'm not surprised on any level that this became the juggernaut and the legend and the powerhouse that it did become. I mean, for God's sake, it was being ripped off and adapted into movies by the 1920s. It was crazy. And the medium of movies had barely been invented. It was like this brand new thing. They were like, what should we make? Dracula. We don't have the rights to it. Fuck it. Title it something else. Make him creepy and bald. It not only invented the entire genre of the vampire book, it invented stealing other people's material, renaming it, and getting around copyright law. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think that this is some type of masterpiece or some type of perfect book. I don't know. I didn't enjoy it quite that much, but I do think it holds up very extremely well for modern readers and from a modern perspective. I will say the style of the book may not be for everybody due to the fact that it is written in journal entries and stuff like that. I know a lot of people bounce off of that kind of a book and don't really vibe with it, and they aren't going to enjoy that part of it. So if that's you, keep that in mind. Me, I really, really, really connect with that particular writing style, so I connected with this book. And then I would say go into it expecting something just a little bit slower, maybe a little bit drier, maybe not quite as bombastic as something that a modern book is going to give you. And I think you're going to enjoy it. I think you'll really like it. And just being able to experience something that is that old, that is that classic, that is that formulative in the worlds of books and horrors and vampires and everything, I think it's great. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. And I recommend everybody read it because I just really like having classics under my belt. Does that make sense? Whatever. As always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.